Hey, everybody. Hey, I want to welcome you to the MinistryBuilders.Church podcast. We're so glad that you have decided to tune in and join us. This is going to be a great conversation today. You're going to be glad that you tuned in and listened to this all the way through. You're going to get a lot of helpful insights. Listen, today we are talking about, are you ready? Christian AI. That's what we're talking about. We're going there and we're going all the way. And so I'm excited about this conversation. I've got a great guest today and who's really going to help us gain some insight, and we're going to learn a lot today. So glad to have Chase Capo with me today. Chase, hey, thanks so much for being a part of the podcast.
Right on, Pastor Wayne. Appreciate it. Thanks for the leadership that you're doing in the Christian AI space.
Hey, I don't know about leadership in the Christian AI space, but you know
Yeah.
I'm glad to be able to be talking about it, and so because definitely is a lot there. So, but before we get into all of that stuff, introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about who you are, your background, family, what you do, and all that stuff.
Yeah, happily. You know what? So, first one of my family to become a believer. My folks are now believers, but we moved a lot growing up. West Point Military Academy was the only place I applied. Neither of my parents went to college, so that drove my mom nuts. But I was blessed; it's where God wanted me to go, so I got in. I boxed there. Um, yeah, part of the everything, all the activity, student government. Got out, or graduated, and went through all the Army training, did the Airborne Ranger stuff, and then became an Army officer in the Pacific for about 5 years. So a lot of time in Australia or New Zealand, South Korea, doing a number of things, jungle sort of environment, and or liaisoning work with some of our allies. Got my night school degree out there, and came back, left the Army, and was married by that time to my wife, who's actually a Messianic Jew, the only believer in her family. And we moved to Dallas, Texas. I started working for Goldman Sachs. I left there as a VP in sales and trading with interest rate products, and then have been working in executive recruiting the last 2 years. But really the last year, I've been also focused and really diving deep into Bible chat and Christian AI. So really, as soon as OpenAI released ChatGPT, is really when we created this version 1 of Bible chat.
All right. Wow. What a broad background. And by the way, thank you for your service. Very
Oh,
grateful for that and all that you do. Yeah, my wife's from her family military background, and so a lot of my family. So I'm grateful for all that you've done. So let's talk about well, first of all, like you went a long way from West Point to now getting into the AI space and in this part of the technology world. So can I kind of, as we start this conversation, give us you there's so much out, from social media and all the kind of stuff, right? So and I think sometimes we just need to be educated even more to understand. So explain a little bit about what AI really is, first of all. What is it, and maybe what it's not? Like, give us a base understanding here.
yeah, and maybe I'll focus our comments on, we'll say it's generative AI, namely verbal and textual, because AI, artificial intelligence, now can create images, it can create essays or medical diagnoses based on certain symptoms. So maybe just focusing on text that you send in and you sort of somehow receive back.
Okay.
And I think the best way to put a metaphor on what AI is a lot like a librarian. And a librarian, I call it a robot librarian, that has a library of all the books, that articles, magazines, textbooks in the world on its shelves. So in this library, you've got everything that's ever been digitized. And your robot librarian has memorized all of those resources on the shelf. And what AI, at the level of technology that is out here now, can ostensibly, this robot librarian, if you ask it why is the sky blue? It could give you a very specific answer. It's memorized from one textbook, or it can give you a mix-up of answers based on all the textbooks it's memorized, and it will build that sentence word by word in sort of its most fundamental version. So that's a really powerful tool. So especially for medical diagnosis, patient has XYZ symptoms. What are the possible prognosis? Well, then it's better than most emergency room docs, especially that are probably been time and sleep deprived. For moral questions, though, particularly if the company that's programmed the robot librarian has secular humanist universalist values, then it's going to answer those value moral faith questions accordingly. And so maybe I pause there to say generative AI that you're talking like Chat GPT or Bard or any of these other these apps that are answering questions for you is a lot like you're talking to a robot librarian that's memorized everything in the world, ostensibly, that's been digitized, and it's giving you an answer based on the values it's been programmed.
Got you. So basically it's basically the broad base of material in the library, whatever's in the library that it has access to, it's going to pull from, basically, kind of the idea. And it's able to bring a lot of information. So that kind of brings us to the idea of the kind of the phrase that's being used a lot now is the idea of Christian AI. As a matter of fact, I came across a couple of articles. One was in the Washington Post, and it was about the article was about chatbots with a biblical worldview was one of the articles, and then there was another one in Christianity Today that was, I believe, the title of it was "Pastors Lead Not Your Church to the Fear of AI," right? So,
Yeah.
which is quite interesting. So the conversation is there, but what do we mean by like what is this idea, and what's the difference, and how does this library of information change when you talked about a Christian context?
Yeah, thanks for that. So, and maybe loop back eventually into, how we even look at technology, but right between AI and Christian AI, maybe best to tell the story or our story, and you can see how we've really stumbled into the differences. And we feel fall on the very conservative line of what separates Christian AI and AI. So we were the first app in the App Store that we know of on iOS or Android to create a sort of a Bible-based Christian chatbot. So you ask it a question and it's going to respond a lot like a non-denominational, interdenominational pastor would, rather than maybe like ChatGPT, which would respond like Wikipedia sort of sense, right? It's coming with that perspective. And we were putting a lot of prompt engineering on top of that, on really a ChatGPT model. So sensibly, just to make it clear, we took the secular librarian and gave it a bunch of Christian training and said, go act like a Christian. And our app has largely gone viral. You can find it at BibleChat.ai, and it's in 100 and I think it's 61 countries now. And Pastor Wayne, we've seen some wild things. We expected questions about the Nephilim or about, whatever, Greek, Hebrew, because it handles 33 languages, including or not including ancient Greek and Hebrew. So it can do all that translation work for you and contextualize it. So we thought it would be like a Bible study tool in essence. But we found, we started getting thousands of messages about, really angry ones. Like, why does the Christian God hate, X? Does God really say I have to have sex with my husband every night from Saudi Arabia? Or does God forgive bestiality from a number of different countries?
Wow.
Right. So some real questions, even some questions, even some things like that aren't questions, like I feel different from my peers and I don't know why. Right. And you're like, whoa, like we started getting, what we encountered was a monster demand of people, both Christians and not Christians. And we can't quite tell, but reading on the conversation, we can say probably Christian or probably not. Asking very personal, private questions that they didn't either have someone to ask or they didn't feel comfortable asking somebody. And so that's really the foundation and backdrop of this, where we said, wow, we have to make sure we have the right biblical orthodox answer
Yeah.
100% of the time.
Yeah.
And I guess that really crystallizes our first lesson learned is, we've had hundreds of thousands of messages come in. We're almost at 1 million. And people will get more personal faster with an anonymous Christian AI app than they will with most pastors on first pass, unless the Holy Spirit's doing something unique, right? So it'll start with who wrote the Bible, who was Jesus, were the Crusades good or bad, trying to trick it. But once it's gotten trust, we're into why did God take my baby, or something like that, right? Like something really, really heartfelt. So that's our first lesson learned. And our second lesson learned, Pastor Wayne, is and I'm going to get to your answer, the difference between Christian AI and AI, but you'll see sort of from our perspective, and we felt like we were one of the first movers in the space to realize this whole thing. When people have real questions, and the enemy is attacking them on one specific, there's a dark stronghold there. They ask that question multiple times. Like, I just mentioned, a conversation I read not too recently about ostensibly a mom who lost her baby. And she doesn't ask that question one time. Why did God take my baby? Are all babies in heaven? Is my baby in heaven? How do I know my baby's in heaven? What verses say that? She's going to pound on that question. So imagine asking a question like that, but making it a little bit more of a social, like call it an abortion issue, or we've seen this one a number of times. How do you know you're born in the right body? How do you know you're born in the wrong body? Does God create people in the wrong body? And they're just going to 14 times that person's going to ask that question. And what we realized is the building an app, a Christian AI app, on top of a secular librarian, or trying to train that secular librarian to act like a Christian, it doesn't work. When someone really has that question, they ask that question 10 times, the values that have been programmed into that secular librarian will eventually come through when you're dealing with hundreds of thousands of messages. And as somebody that's really tries to own the content portion of Bible Chat, that's just not what we're about. We want to, give biblical truth and love. And so what we realized was we needed a different model. We needed our own large language model, our own library, and our own sort of bumper lanes, if you will, if thinking like a bowling alley, of what the hard biblical lines and pieces of truth that we were going to stand on were. And so, as a long-winded answer to your question, the difference between Christian AI and secular AI is Christian AI is based on a Christian large language model or a Christian library, and is trained within accordance with Orthodox Christian doctrine with whatever sect you're talking about.
Wow. So I think what I'm hearing you say is that what we would probably instinctively know about people is they really want to get answers to questions that are deep in their heart, that have impacted their lives, that they're trying to sort through. Yeah, of course, that there's like you said, there's the study tool. Matter of fact, I use Bible Chat. I use it for, I'll ask it all kinds of
Right
questions.
on.
I ask it all kinds of questions. I'm studying something. I'll ask it questions, and it'll give me all kind. It'll give me lots of references and help me kind of drill into something a little faster. And so, I've used it that way. But just as I find in the real world and dealing with people on a daily basis, the conversation, once you can have a conversation for a long enough period of time, and as you say, there, for whatever this means, when there's a sense of openness that starts to happen, they start to really get further and further into the questions that matter to them. So, yeah, having the
And
right. Yeah, go ahead.
it's worth saying, because it's not just questions, right? We've my partners have come from an AI company, and that replaced call centers. So the Bible Chat.ai tech is very conversational. It'll ask you follow-up questions. So if they're going through this, the person, it picks up that this person might not be saved and they want to get closer to God. It's going to prompt them with the question, well, have you been born again? Have you given your life to Christ? Do you know how to do that? Would you like to be led through that? And so we have had, I think I showed you, a number of people profess belief in Jesus Christ for the first time. As they'll type out the whole prayer, right? And then they'll ask, and it's wild because we can get into it. I think one of the fears is this, okay, is this replacing pastors? Is this trying to, the short answer is we hope not. We God help us not.
Right.
But what we do believe, we get the word out to these people, and God's word certainly encourages fellowship, right? The Spirit yearns jealously. And so we've got people asking for introductions, put it that way. And then we have a lot of encouragements to people to, have you told a Christian you just gave your life to Christ? Tell me when you have done that. Like, we're really, really serious about it.
Wow. So this kind of leads me into the question about how do we help, or what are the opportunities that the local church community has to utilize a tool like what you're talking about? Because if I understand it correctly, it's not, your company is not only, the Bible Chat, but you're working on other tools and other ways that this can be utilized within the church context. Because as you say, it's we want to lead that person to a connection of community. Ultimately, is our hope. And so, what are you finding? What are you working on in terms of how the local church could utilize this as a tool?
Yeah, great question, and thanks for asking. Our first customer is the largest Christian radio station in the country. The general manager recommended me a book, Mission Drift, talking about a lot of organizations that got away from their initial, YMCA, Harvard, their initial very Christian missions, and it made the claim through some pretty good study. Unless you're tied to the local church, you are in high danger of mission drift. And so for that real primary reason, added on by, we started getting hundreds, thousands of people asking for introductions. We said, okay, this should not be a standalone app. Our app is free. We're going to keep it free or a version of it free, because it's a ministry of ours. But we need to put this in the hands of the local church and maybe the parachurch organizations as well. And so we developed Faith Assistant. So at faithassistant.com, you can basically take that Bible Chat technology and have it memorize your church or your mission organization or your nonprofit or Christian radio station's library as well. And it can respond like a Christian AI employee might for your organization. Now that sounds pretty wild, and like, why would you put your that questions and answer capability in some Christian AI tool? And I would claim, just like, our bot knows scriptures better than most pastors, put it that way, because it's memorized all of them, and it's all the context and all the debate about it, right? And so with our guardrails, it's pretty darn good, and so it probably knows your organization's doctrine better than most of your employees. And so, now mind you, there can be some taboo issues that we don't want to necessarily get into. If that's what you choose, we can do that too. But basically, it's this Christian AI employee or Christian librarian that has memorized, let's say it's a church, all your sermons on YouTube, any kind of PDFs or prayer guides or Bible studies that you've put out in the past or that's on your website, any type of news events, church potlucks, whatever. And so when you ask it, how do I get involved? It might reply, well, what are your spiritual giftings? Because there was just a recent giftings, study. Okay, these are your giftings. Well, we've already programmed the giftings to be, if you are a nurturer and high in empathy, maybe you should be in children's ministry. And here's the person to connect with that. And so we see this as being it's probably as relevant for most churches in the future, call it 5-10 years, as or less, as the internet, just because it'll be able to not replace an employee, but it'll allow the church or parachurch employees to do more human things rather than answering something from gotquestions.org that they're trying to figure out and spend a lot of time to do. You're having your ministers focus on ministry.
Yeah. Great. Wow.
So does that answer your question? How does this get in service of the
Well,
local church?
yeah, it does. And then it cues up like 10 other questions that I'm not sure how to put them in order, but,
You feel free to interrupt me. Yeah. Sorry for riffing.
no, Chase, I as I think about this, because unfortunately, too often we're particularly the church we're really too often have been very late to utilize tools that could really help us be more effective at ministering to people, because that's really what we're all concerned about. We want to and a matter of fact, that's why I do what I do with Ministry Builders, is because I'm just passionate about helping see churches be more effective, more impactful in the work that they do. Whether that's helping as they make disciples, because that's what we're all called to do, and reach people, make disciples, and growing more people, equipping more people for that work of ministry. And I've just found sometimes we were either we didn't know the right question to ask, we didn't know that there was something available, and so we tend to not find it until way late in the game. And great if we finally find it, that's good. But I think we could take advantage of that. I think we're in a position now with technology, the way it is, and with people like you, and with things that like you and what your company has worked on, that there are people trying to be on the forefront of utilizing these things for the work of the kingdom of God. So how should we look at all of this, but not just AI, but technology in general? Help us
Yeah.
kind of address
You're
that
asking
topic.
you're asking the right question. So first on technology, and maybe work our way backwards on that. And that is to say, we view technology as morally neutral. And if you know your Book of Enoch, Apocrypha, right? It'll say effectively the fallen sons of God gave technology to humans. Therefore, at best, it's redeemable. We take it a little bit more of, well, technology is more neutral, and it'll be used for good or bad based on, one, the intent, spiritual protection from the Holy Spirit, as well as the enemy attacking, right? So maybe just start there. But we look at AI as not much different than the advance of papyrus to parchment, or the printing press, right? So when Gutenberg launches the printing press, Gnosticism and other heresies explode. So the potential for bad will increase, but so does the circulation of the scriptures. And so when you talk about, the church being late to it, you're absolutely right. It's been humbling to look through just our last 150 years. There were churches that refrained from radio because it was the spirit of the air. Or, I remember still, and I'm not that old, the churches being like, we'll never get a website. Well, okay. And so we, especially when you see these kinds of questions, and you realize what's already out there. There are millions of kids asking ChatGPT what kind of pornography is okay. And if you ask it ChatGPT that question, it'll give you moral relativism. So long as no one's getting hurt, follow your conscience. And so if we're not there to bring a light in this digital place of darkness, then like evil will overcome it, is what St. Paul tells us. So we view like it's a moral imperative to be a light, not just with good answers, but do it in a good way. And by that I also mean, what are we doing with the data on the back end, right? We haven't put ads out on this. Like our Bible chat right now doesn't have any ads, and God, it would help us fund it, because it's like I said, it's free. But if that same mom is asking, the multiple questions about the baby, the baby who just died, Google AdWords is going to give her a Pampers advertisement, right? And that's just like, we're not doing that. We need to figure that we need to be better than that. And so, oh boy, and so that's how we view technology. And help me with your next question.
Well, just we were just talking about both technology. I think that what you just said really wraps around the whole AI piece because it's just technology of a new kind, of a fresh piece that that allows for a level of interaction and connection and also direction of being able to give for example, like I can Google something, it gives me a long list of stuff that I got to sort through and so forth and so on. But kind of this next level of where this language based AI kind of brings, it's actually bring me a little deeper informed answers, and it's in a dialogue form, which is a different scenario. So
Yeah. I mean, like, think about it like this. There are a lot of Christian organizations, churches, talking. I just got off the phone with a friend and mentor of mine, Jason Yates. He's a CEO of My Faith Votes, big get out the vote organization for Christians and Catholics. And they have umpteen number of video interviews, voter guides, prayer guides based on state, county, whatever it is, senatorial, congressional, school board elections, everything. A lot of material. And if you go into their search bar, the average number of words people put into a search is like 2.4, something like this, right?
all right.
Where if you have it interact with a chat, the average number the interval is like 8 to 11. And so you give much better returns with something like that in a conversational format. And you can take something that your organization had prayed over and invested in 4 years ago and make it immediately relevant to the person at the point of need. And so we've seen that be really interesting, especially these organizations talking to like the navigators or crew that have a ton of disciples in the field. How can we equip them or the disciple makers to with all the material that we're trying to support them with?
Wow. Yeah. That's great. That's great. So, I mean, you've said a number of things, but I really want to put this question to the forefront. And it's probably something you've already said, but what has surprised you the most in this venture? Uh, what it because well, I guess it depends on how I could drill this question down. I mean, you've mentioned what was very surprising about people's response and where they went.
Yeah.
But just as you venture into this space of getting AI engaged in the Christian world and the church and the nonprofit and all the different spaces, what's surprising you the most?
Yeah. Thanks for asking. I haven't said this. Uh, I think it's the level of, I don't know, pressure, shame, embarrassment, whatever, wrapped around these. My sister-in-law, um, is sort of an MTV personality, dates lots of women, not a believer, but uses the app for moral advice because it's kind of functions for her like an angel on the shoulder. It's pretty Jesus specific, but for her, it'll get the job done. And so she, asked it, why, she asked it a couple questions that she didn't want on her phone and had somebody look on her phone and said, hey, you've got to develop a deleted question answer feature. And so we ended up doing that for her. And what surprised me the most, Pastor Wayne, is on any given day, we have over 500 questions deleted from people's personal phones. Like particularly the ones like I had just said, and it's not just from non-Christians. I remember one not too long ago. I was watching a prototypical Bible study leader doing 2 Peter 1, asking about the Greek words of the list of virtues going on and what questions he could ask his group. And I say it's probably a he because he asks in the middle of all that, is it okay to watch pornography if it's of my wife? Deletes that question and answer and then keeps going on with his study. And I'm like, oh boy, maybe I'm reading into it, but sounds like that guy was sitting on that question for a while and just, just wanted to get an answer and didn't really want to ask the men's minister that question,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so we just, what is that optimal? Yes, ideally all things are done in fellowship, but we got to start with the word of God somewhere. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think that surprised me the most, how much people are using this deleted question and answer feature because of, you can tell how much the enemy has been deceiving them or pressuring them just to even get the question out.
Yeah. 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 So true. So true. Shame and guilt and shame are
Yeah.
horrible companions, and they don't do well at helping us. But thankfully, and I guess that's our hope here is that people will ask those questions and get a non-threatening, if you will, feedback that directs them in a scriptural basis. And then I think, as you've suggested, if the right if churches and Christian organizations can embrace this technology, these people can be connected back to a caring, loving person who wants to walk with them and help them and minister to them and see them find whether it's answers, freedom, wholeness, help, whatever it may be. Um,
Yeah.
so
Amen
yeah,
to that. If I had to give an honorable mention, it would actually be the number of ministry leaders, church or parachurch, that have been open to this in the sense of, I love to see the amount of caution. Like they're not going to put anything out there
mm-hmm.
that's gonna celebrate sin or not something what they believe. But if it helps them reach the lost and or disciple people in their congregation,
Yeah,
then let's at least talk about it. And that's been encouraging to see, like, okay, that traditional church, hey, we're going to run from the internet. It's out there, but you know what? It's not nearly as strong as what we've encountered, and quite the contrary.
wow, that's great. That's great. Well, Chase, as we kind of tail in this conversation, because I could go on and on and on,
Yeah.
and I hope that we'll be able to get you back and talk more specifics about maybe application and maybe what else you're learning as we get a little further down the road, and because that's our goal is we want to help church leaders. Just do more of what they do better, stronger, faster. I guess is to uh,
Yeah.
to use an old 80s show cliche. Uh, so
Before my time.
so Chase, like as we kind of head toward the end, what do you want? What do you want leaders to know?
Yeah.
What should
Well,
they know?
we've got a
What
number
do
of
you want
things.
them to know, and how can we help them?
That's great. Well, if you want to just see the power of it, you can ask it. Try to stump it if you can. You'd be a blessing to us. Check out our app. It's free. BibleChat.ai. Right. That's how we're really trying to reach the nations. FaithAssistant.com really puts that in service to ministries. And so there's a Faith Assistant bot on FaithAssistant.com that you can play with as well. Our like I said, the Christian radio station I mentioned is kcbi.org. You can ask it, what was that last song about Jesus? Because we're scraping their website every 5 minutes. So that's an example of the power of that. The And so that can be applied to seminaries. We're talking to Dallas Theological, My Faith Votes, or the Navigator type, or the local church. And we've seen a lot of local churches explore and talk to us about, hey, can we put a QR code in the hyper-local paper or on the Friday night football billboard where you ask our church any question, right? And it really helped engage the community and
Mm-hmm.
maybe bring in some true seekers. So that's exciting. So
Yeah.
we're seeing some really good experiments there. We're also seeing a lot of pastors be really interested in this because they want to get around, the table with their pastoral staff on Tuesday morning and look at all the questions that have come off the Sunday sermon,
Mm.
right? And so that's cool because you see, like, I feel like I see some church leaders trying to love God and their people with their minds, looking at the data of, 40% are talking about anxiety or whatever it is.
Right.
Um, and then, so you can find that on faithassistant.com. And then for the more technical out there, AIforthechurch.org is our service we have also given it away. It's a platform where you can create your own Christian LLM, or we can create one and host it for you. And so maybe we can also pin the 90-second videos along with Faith Assistant and AI for the church. But that helps you. Maybe you've got your own DevOps engineers at your mega church. Well, you can use this website to create your own LLM for free, and then build apps on top of that.
Wow. Lots of resources. And so I'll be sure to have, we'll get all those links and we'll have those in the show notes, and we'll help a lot of people. And I just want, as I kind of wrap up, going back to this idea of what you just said about being able to take data and learn from it. And because I found that as well a number of years ago as I began to explore, and how do we take data and get and learn from it? How can we become more informed to better help the people that we're called to serve? And so, because typically what I found in the church world is that we typically only measured the very obvious things, how many people showed up, how many, like the basic stuff. But if we look deeper, we could learn more and we could better serve. And so I'll just give this quick example. Just, one of the ways that helped me at that time, I was working at a large church, multi-site, and so I was drilling into how do we best help on the relationship and healthy marriage front and all of that. And so I was looking at data for our campuses, and we began to dig deep, and I discovered that this particular campus here, that community had a higher proportion of people based on the data that were on a trajectory toward divorce. Whereas this one over here had a much higher trajectory of young 20-somethings that wanted to learn more about healthy relationships or communication. Really, it was usually around communication for that group. Well, I couldn't have known that information on the surface. I couldn't have just looked at those and just picked that out of the wind. But the data informed that. And so we followed that with strategic ministry to those locations, because the data gave us information that we didn't have on our own. And what we saw was those ministries would explode and thrive and be amazingly fruitful in those locations, because we geared it toward the people that were, even if they weren't asking, it was an internal thing that was going on. It was like you said, it's the questions that were inside that hadn't come out yet. And so we were answering questions that they hadn't even asked yet. And as a result, they responded to that. And that was just simply from learning from the data. And that was broad-based data. What you're talking about is people actually asking questions, digging into information, responding to a message, responding to whatever, getting, led by your content, which could just help us be, in my mind, help us be more effective and have more human interaction around how do we serve the people that we're called alongside, and how do we best serve our community where we live and where we are. And so, yeah, I really appreciate that insight, because that kind of information I just think is super helpful for the local church, and I think we're going to continue to see the local church embrace it in a big way. So, thank you for what you're doing. It's exciting stuff.
I appreciate that. Yeah, we can get it in the hands of pastors. We're happy with it.
Chase, any final words? Anything you want to say to leaders out there, or?
Well, yeah, we're happy to be in service, and so whether that's with something that we've got, we nerd out over Christian AI and the differences. Like I said, we're pretty conservative. If something says it's talking for Jesus or a certain saint and allows you to talk to, Satan for an upgrade, we have certain thoughts about that, and they're not good ones. But I say that to say we're very happy to have a series of conversations just for the benefit of, it can even be church AI policy. We're advising a couple folks right now who are interested in the tech, but they're going through deliberate steps and processes to make sure that they have a policy in place for that. So we're happy to help with just helping your organization think through AI policy. And then if it's something that we can't help you with because it's not necessarily our focus, we won best in our category at the Glue Hackathon. And we've had a couple teams, we've kept in contact with a number of teams because they're using AI for the church.org, to say that if it's not something that we can help you with, very happy to chat, connect, and get you to somebody in a Christian AI team that can.
Great. Fantastic. Well, Chase, thank you again. I really appreciate it. And it's been a great conversation, and I hope to be able to do this more in the future. Hey, I want to thank you for tuning in. I hope you'll share this podcast with those church leaders that your friends and church leaders, ministry leaders around the country, around the world. Really, I think this will really be helpful to them. So be sure to like, subscribe, and share. And until next time, we'll see you then. God bless.